I really had no clue how to accept Adventure Time when it first aired in like 2010. But my kids loved it, and after hearing it in the background for a year or so, I finally got hooked by some of the bizarre ways the characters spoke. I would say it was don't spank your baby in the face, Mama Bear, and no, don't eat the candy that can talk. They're special. They have aspirations. That made me really interested in seeing more of this show. I have been so surprised with Adventure Time and the level of creativity and detail that it offers its viewers. I love their hit the ground running episode scripts and how we've slowly had backstories put together over years and years of careful planning. But as most of us know, Adventure Time is slated to end in the not too distant future. And so we can expect to see a lot of questions answered over the upcoming seasons. I canceled our satellite about 2 years ago, and I don't have any other cable sources, just good old Netflix, Hulu, and YouTube. But thanks to an early DVD release, I did get to experience the Islands miniseries and be ahead of the curve for once. That being said, I wanted to talk about Islands before it hit Cartoon Network's airwaves. This video is going to be riddled with spoilers, so run away now if you haven't watched Islands yet. And like you may be able to guess, I'm not current on Adventure Time in general, so if you'd do me a solid and not spoil anything between the end of Finn's dad's story arc and Islands, I'd appreciate it. I honestly have no clue why Finn has automail now and who the grass Finn guy was, and I'm okay to wait and get there, so shh. Now, onto the Islands miniseries. It has been hinted at for years, but it was finally confirmed, in my opinion, that the land of Oo is in a post-apocalyptic Earth where humans have all but eradicated themselves. I also had a whoa moment when Jake was accused of being a mutant, and even Jake realized that he had no idea if he was magical or a mutated dog monster. You know, it's been right there in front of us this entire time, and I never thought Jake was on the same level as the candy people, but wow, okay, mind blown. I want to jump right into what we see after the Guardian wrecks the Jake boat. First, we have what I'm going to call Island number 1, and a big chunk of it is this really lush jungle with crazy weather and insanely hazardous animals, most of which had little booties on, I noticed. And here we find the technologically advanced Alva, who is the lone survivor of a colony of humans who couldn't hack it in that extreme environment. I'm going to come back to the landscape of this island in a few minutes, but for now I want to touch on Alva and how she is the first human we've met who doesn't speak English. Now, I'm 99% certain that Alva is speaking German, and that by itself is odd since we later learn that the other islands don't appear to hold anyone else speaking any other language, but that also struck me as a clue. The only other character I've ever heard speak in German is Princess Bubblegum. So did PB and Alva's team meet before? I mean, Princess Bubblegum did have a lot of concern about Finn leaving and not returning to the land of Oo. The way she made Finn promise to come home made me wonder if PB knows a lot more about humans than she's ever let Finn know of. After Crazy Weather Island, Finn and Jake head over to the next island and discover this society that kind of makes me think like Vikings or something ransacked it. We find out that the inhabitants have been living in these capsules so that they can stay in a virtual reality world 24/7, and their human bodies are very emaciated and sickly. But when Jake breaks their virtual reality link and they all get freed, they aren't happy to be out in the sunlight. They're angry and acting like zombies or crackheads on some severe withdrawal. So the gang fixes the VR machine on island number 2 and then gets in this shuttle tube thing to go over to island number 3. So we see the third island, and it's really been deserted for quite a long time by the looks of it. And here we find that Susan is actually Kara, and she says that the island's been deserted for about a decade. And she tells Finn that their society was built around a similar principle to The Giver, where people are given jobs based on their skill set and free thinkers are not encouraged or welcomed. We learn that Kara is so huge because she was raised to be a seeker, which is someone who hunts down runaways, aka hiders, and brings them back to the island for re-education. We're also made aware that this society has experimenters who make gadgets and helpers who are at least doctors and nurses, maybe police and firefighters too, we're not really sure. After finding island number 3 to be uninhabited, Kara nabs an abandoned ship and heads to Island 4, where she says Finn's mother is. We also learn that Finn's dad was from the same island, and he was an experimenter who helped citizens become hiders. Martin gave up that life to be with Minerva, Finn's mom, but his past caught up with him. He had to run away on a raft with baby Finn, and the Guardian came after that. That disappearance not only confused Minerva, it crushed her. And that's how Finn ended up in the land of Oo, and why his father said that he really meant to come back for baby Finn. Oh, the feels. Now, of course, Finn can't get a break in the parenting department, and it turns out that his mother is dead-ish. She had her brain uploaded into a computer so that she can use her robots to continue to be a helper, but her physical body died after the doctor-teacher figure, Dr. Gross, made an experiment that went wrong and killed most of the human population again. I have to stop and tell you guys, I was sobbing by the end of the mini-series when Finn was saying goodbye to his mom with the VR equipment. I mean, come on. They couldn't even write this so that the VR headset could work anywhere and Finn could still visit Minerva. Why you gotta be like this, Mr. Ward? But after drying those feels up, I realized something. Dr. Gross, who almost wiped out humanity again, makes a comment when she first appears in Kara's memories. Dr. Gross tells her students that their island wasn't always so green and beautiful, that the islands had been a desert and they terraformed them to make them suitable for humans to live on. And that sent me on a backward spiral to evaluate all the other islands, because we're specifically told that the islands, plural, were altered. So that means that island number 1 with Alva was also originally a desert landscape, and this was likely the testing site of humanity's first terraforming experiment after the great, I believe they call it Mushroom War, the thing that blew the big gash in the world. Obviously, the testing site went horrifically wrong and made living conditions that were unfit for humans, so the human race went on to colonize the other 3 islands instead. But why were all of the humans on Island 1 speaking German? Well, if the planet has had time to get a chunk blown out of it and heal enough to accept new life forms, then these people have probably been on these islands for a long, long time, possibly thousands of years at a minimum. But then again, since they do have science and technology that we can't even comprehend in today's world, that could also have sped a lot of things up, so it's really hard to say. However, if any of the original terraforming scientists were German and they refused or couldn't speak English at all, it would make sense that his crew would have to learn it as well to communicate with him. That's why Alva seems to understand English but only speaks German, yet Finn finds a book on plants in English in the old bunker houses, because the research colonists had to get on page on what language they were going to speak all the time. Then, after terraforming proved unsuccessful, eventually nature showed up to fill in the gaps and crazy animals appeared, which killed off most of the scientist settlers and left Alva alone. And I do think that the animals had to be attracted to that island because we're told the islands were deserts when the founders first set up shop. But why doesn't Alva sail away to be with other people? After all, she is the one who tells Finn and Jake that there are 3 other islands, so she's very aware that they're out there. I know at first glance, the Guardian seems like the excuse to stay put. This robot stops people from coming into the islands, and it stops people from fleeing the islands, but it appears to me that the Guardian has no problem with people moving around between the islands. Not only does the Guardian not resurface while Finn and Jake go between the islands, but during the flashback where Martin fights the Guardian, Martin's plan was to circle around the island and go home, and he starts pleading with the Guardian saying he wasn't trying to escape. But like we saw, the weather kicked up and pushed Martin and Finn just a bit too far, making it seem like they were running off. And since Finn had to manually link a cable from Minerva to disable the Guardian, it doesn't seem like the robot is controlled remotely from a computer system. So that means that the Guardian's directive only activates for people going in certain directions. meaning you could sail from Island 1 to Island 4, no problem, but if you change course to head outside of the island zone and leave the perimeter of going to another island, the Guardian will come to stop you, unless you're flying overhead, which somehow the Guardian doesn't detect. Which is really weird since this human society seems so advanced that they would just have this kind of sea monster robot protecting them and nothing for aerial attacks. So I really have no idea why Alva's choosing to stay all alone, except that she may not like the rules on Islands 3 and 4. After looking at that, Island 2 also seemed really bizarre to me. How is everyone there addicted to virtual reality, but that service doesn't seem to exist on Island 3 or 4? I mean, they have access to VR on Founders Island because Finn ends up with the headset to interact with his mom. So what happened to island number 2? Well, look at the giant spheres that are brimming with these body containers. I dare to claim that island number 2 ended up being a prison island, but people just kept trying to escape, either to go back to islands 3 or 4, or to move beyond that and see what else the world has to offer now. So, caring about everyone in the human race, except Alva, the founders figured out a more humane way to contain prisoners. Let me pause and talk about a fantastic book called The Good Earth. In it, the main character has a problem with his uncle being a pain, spending too much money, and always giving everyone grief. Because the protagonist was obligated to take care of his uncle, he figured out the easiest, cheapest solution was to get him hooked on opium and keep the uncle drugged out in the background for the rest of his life. Similarly, it seems like island number 2 is filled with inhabitants that are meant to be subdued until they die of natural causes. So instead of banishing them to an island where they can plot to escape, or killing them outright, which would be far too barbaric for a society that is that hoity-toity about their civilization, the powers that be just took the problem citizens and got them hooked on a different type of drug to keep them subdued and out of the way humanely. This is the re-ed process, why people are so afraid of it, and why we never see someone who's come back from it. Note, I know we did see Frida get caught trying to leave, but they don't say what became of her after that, so it's likely that she got off with a warning since her boat looked like an experiment, so she talked her way out of it, I would think. And after all, Kara describes a shuttle coming for Martin to take him to Re-ed, and lo and behold, there's a shuttle that connects Island 2 and Island 3, possibly Island 4 as well. So there is no Re-ed, there's only a VR prison. So if you have watched Islands, and you are better versed than I am with the last 2-ish seasons of Adventure Time, does this theory fit for you? Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed enough to like, subscribe, and share this video. I've also got a lot of other videos on my channel that you are fully encouraged to go check out. Plus, you can find me on Facebook at Say Halo Goodbye, which is my gamer tag, or Twitter at _Fanily.